Alexei forcefully slammed the door, lacking the strength to do so. He had acquired this struggling company 2 weeks ago, and it seemed like the employees were still struggling to comprehend the change. After his final conversation with them today, he realized that if they continued to display the same lackadaisical attitude as the previous owner, he would have no choice but to replace the entire staff. This was his third visit to the company, and it was also his last. He couldn't understand why people seemed more interested in complaining about their low wages instead of putting in the effort to improve their situation. Initially, he had believed that they were simply unhappy and eager to work, but today confirmed his suspicions. Whining and laziness had become their way of life. Michael got into his car, deep in thought. After considering his options, he decided to make a phone call. "Max, hi. I need to ask you to cover for me for a week. I want to take care of this mess. Thanks, Max." Max was not only Michael's friend, but also his business associate, colleague, and partner. They had started their journey together and fought their way to success. 3 years ago, they split the company, with Max focusing on the supply side and Michael on production. The split wasn't due to any quarrels, but rather to prevent any potential conflicts in the future. Each of them had their own business, and they didn't rely on each other, but they always supported one another. They both knew the ins and outs of the work, so it wasn't difficult for Michael to help at Max's company when needed, and vice versa. Michael didn't acquire this small company with the intention of making huge profits. It was simply in his hometown, a town slowly fading away. He knew that wealth wouldn't come easily here, and his decision to buy the company was driven more by nostalgia for the city than a well-thought-out business plan. But the indifference towards work in this company surprised him. The employees seemed content with not achieving anything. It seemed to be a prevalent attitude everywhere. Michael initially believed that changing the manager would be enough, but now he realized that he would have to take matters into his own hands. As he started his car, he pondered on finding a place to stay for a week or maybe 2. Staying in a local hotel was out of the question. He knew from past experiences the extent of their cockroach infestation. He needed to find an apartment. Michael pulled out of the parking lot, catching the unamiable gazes from the company's employees in his peripheral vision. Misha drove aimlessly through the city, hoping to find a rental agency for accommodation. However, he soon realized that finding such an agency in the entire city was highly unlikely. He eventually stumbled upon one that closed at 5, but to his dismay, the door was already shut despite it being only 3 o'clock. Confusion washed over him as he pondered his next move. The thought of traveling 300 kilometers just to spend the night did not appeal to him. In a moment of desperation, he found himself pulling into his old yard, where he used to live 8 years ago. He parked his car and reflected on the memories associated with that place, including the driveway where he resided and the one where Tanya, his former neighbor, lived. Shaking off the nostalgia, Misha noticed a group of elderly ladies sitting on a bench. He even had to wipe his eyes to clear his vision. Among them was Margarita Genadievna, who was notorious for causing trouble not only in her yard, but also in the neighboring ones. She had aged considerably, though Misha remembered her as an elderly lady even back then. Stepping out of his car, Misha felt Margarita's intense gaze fixated on his vehicle. Nothing had changed. Margot, as she was affectionately called, was always on guard. Approaching Margarita, Misha greeted her with a warm hello. She squinted her eyes, shielding them from the sun, and unexpectedly broke into a smile. "Mishka, is it really you?" she exclaimed. Misha was amazed that Margarita remembered him after all these years. He reciprocated the smile and replied, "Yes, it's me, Margarita Genadievna." Seeing someone she recognized but couldn't quite place, Margarita asked, "Why have you come to visit us? I heard you've become quite successful." Misha took a seat beside her and explained, "Well, somewhat successful. I've actually purchased your company, Semiflower. I need to find work, and in order to do so, I need to live here for a while. I didn't want to stay in a hotel, as I assume nothing has changed there either." Margarita burst into laughter, causing the other elderly ladies to join in. Misha couldn't help but laugh along with them. "Well, why do you say that?" Margarita chuckled. "Things have indeed changed. There are even more cockroaches now." And so the laughter continued, creating a cheerful atmosphere as Misha reunited with the familiar faces from his past. "Don't worry, Mish. You don't need to search for anything. Stay here with me. I have 3 rooms I can accommodate you." "Oh, Margarita Genadievna, won't I be disturbing you?" "Why would you be a bother to me? How could you disturb me?" You'll be working, won't you? I won't get bored. Misha didn't expect such luck. He didn't really want to live in his own yard, but why not give it a try? There's no one he knows around here anyway. The most important thing is that Tanya is gone. She left first, and he only realized that she wasn't joking, that she actually left him. Margot bid farewell to the old ladies and headed towards the house. Come on, I'll make you some tea and tell you about life. Margarita Genadievna, I think I'll go to the store first. I'll buy some groceries. Sure, go ahead. Maybe my porridge won't suit your taste. At our age, what else can we eat but porridge? Do you remember how to find my apartment? Of course I remember. Misha got into the car and drove out of the yard. After a while, he spotted a large store, parked the car, and went inside, thinking to himself, well, at least there's some civilization in the trading industry here. He returned to Margot with 2 full bags of groceries and asked for permission to take a shower. Misha, why are you acting like a child? You're still living here, so there's no need to ask for permission. An hour later, they were sitting at the table. Margot asked him about his work and plans, and Misha answered, and why do you need that company? It's been worthless for a long time now. And the people there, they are all stuck in the past, expecting to be paid for doing nothing. You can't change anything. Margarita Genadievna, this is a different era. No one will spend their own money on those who don't want to work, and neither will I. If they don't want to work, I'll find others. Young people who need the money. She shook her head. Well, maybe you're right. Times have truly changed. Margarita Genadievna, let's discuss how much I should pay you. She even waved her hands. Have you completely lost your mind, Misha? What money are you talking about? You only brought some groceries, and at least I'm not so bored. She ignored his words and directed him towards the room. Here, make yourself comfortable. There's a spacious couch and bedding in the closet. You can set up yourself since my arms are tired. What time do you need to leave for work in the morning? She asked. I'll be there in about 7 hours, Misha replied. Good, have a rest then, she said. Misha took out his laptop, made his bed, and settled down. However, he found himself too tired to work. He couldn't shake off the exhaustion. When the alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning, Misha got up and headed for the bathroom. Margot was already busy in the kitchen, and a delightful aroma of baked goods filled the air. After showering, Misha joined Margot in the kitchen. He noticed smoking eggs and fluffy pancakes waiting for him on the table. He looked at Margot in surprise. Is that for me? But I usually don't eat breakfast in the morning, Misha said. That's your biggest mistake. You've been running around hungry, lacking energy. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Try it, and you'll see the difference in your day. Margot replied with a smile. Misha smiled back. He knew from childhood that it was pointless to argue with Margot. Despite his initial hesitation, he finished the meal without realizing it. Margot smiled as she watched Misha's astonished expression at the empty plates. Well, now I'm full and won't be able to work, Misha said playfully. You can still work, but remember what I said, Margot replied. Mike Hall arrived at the office at 8:30. Although the working day officially started at 8, he closed the door behind him and pressed the doorbell. However, to his surprise, nobody responded. He found it strange since he knew they had 24-hour security at the premises. At 10 minutes to 8, a security guard usually arrived. Excuse me, aren't you supposed to be here? Misha asked the guard. Shouldn't you be here? We have 24-hour security, the guard replied. Well, no one comes out at night, so why should I sit here? The guard added. Michael realized it was futile to argue. He walked through the open door and entered the office building. As he made his way through the first floor, he passed by the personnel department, security offices, and logistics department. The time was 8:00 a.m., and the office was empty. It wasn't until 8:15 a.m. that the first employee arrived. By 9:00 a.m., they were halfway through their tasks. Michael called for everyone to gather in the lobby, causing nervousness among the employees. No one expected the new owner to show up so early, so they were in no rush. Initially, the meeting seemed like a threat to everyone's job security, but Michael had decided to assess their abilities instead. Misha informed me that everything was about to change, not just the way they worked, but also their salaries. After the meeting, he requested the presence of the head of security and the HR representative. I shared with the head of security about an incident earlier that morning. He warned me not to speak of it further, as he would simply replace the guards and had a lengthy discussion with the HR department. He was beginning to get acquainted with the staff through their personnel files. He was quite efficient, often smiling as he highlighted Margot's name. Despite it being 4 days later, he remained energized and satisfied without feeling tired or hungry. 3 days later, he had terminated almost half of the staff. People started coming to him for interviews, which made Misha realize an interesting aspect of the people in this town. They simply couldn't conceive that there could be an alternative way of living or making money. That evening, he shared his discoveries with Margot, who responded with a smile. Misha expressed his belief that one could change a person's mindset, to which Margot disagreed, stating that all people were the same. Misha tried to argue that change was possible, but Margot remained steadfast in her opinion. Unbeknownst to Michael, Margot's response was influenced by his past relationship with Tanya. He suddenly remembered Tanya and their love. He felt a deep regret as he realized that he had never sought the truth from Tanya. He had simply pushed her away, and she never made an effort to explain either. Misha attempted to engage in conversation, but it was too late. Tanya had already left without a trace. She had deceived and betrayed him, as revealed by a friend who knew all about Tanya. It all fit together so perfectly that Michael felt foolish for not realizing it sooner. He returned home, where Tanya had lived with him for 3 months. He was initially overjoyed, but then came Olya, who informed him about Tanya's behavior when he was away on business. When he came home, Tanya would have the table set, looking beautiful and cheerful. She would eagerly embrace him, but he looked at her and asked, "What are you celebrating? What's the matter, Mishenka? What's the problem? Gather your things and leave. I don't want such people in the house." "Misha, what are you saying?" "What am I saying? They told me everything about you, everything? And you believed it without even asking me anything? You don't need to ask anything." Tanya silently packed up and left. And 3 days later, he realized that he hadn't even let her speak. Even the most dangerous criminal has the right to have the last word. But Tanya had already left. Out of anger, Misha then got involved with the same Olda. She had been chasing him for a long time, but it didn't last long. He decided to leave. Everything reminded him of Tanya and his happiness. Alba screamed, cried, and begged him to take her with him. But Misha never loved her, and the thought of taking her with him didn't even cross his mind. Misha came home from work. Seeing Margot sitting on the bench, he decided to greet the grandmothers first and then go home. "Misha? Hello." He turned around. Standing in front of him was the same Olya. "Olya, hi. How are you?" "I'm fine." "How about a husband and kid?" "How are they?" "Just normal. But no family, no kid." "You didn't marry Tanya." Olya looked at him in surprise. "How could I marry her? You even told me yourself that she cheats on me." "Misha, you're such a fool. I always liked you, so I made up those stories. I never thought you would believe everything so literally." Olya walked away, and Misha stood there with his mouth open. So Tanya, she didn't cheat on him, and he had sent her away without even listening. The man turned around, feeling confused. Margot had already approached him and was looking at him carefully. That's where the wind was blowing from. "What a fool you are, Mishka, a fool." He realized that he had been a fool, but not anymore. 8 years had passed. He saw Margot staring somewhere. She squinted. He followed her gaze and saw a boy, no older than 7, waving his arms and crying. And it was all completely silent. People couldn't hear him, so no one was paying attention. The boy noticed that they were looking at him and waved even harder, pointing to the open wall hatch. Misha asked Margot, "What is he currently engaged in?" "What occurred?" "That's Slava. He cannot speak. Since he is mute, I understand why he is waving his arms silently." Misha hurried over to the boy. "What's wrong? What happened?" The boy pointed towards the well and made a mooing sound. Tears streamed down his face endlessly. Misha turned on the flashlight on his phone and leaned over the opening. The elderly women from the bench were already rushing towards them. Sitting down there, trembling with fear and cold, was a tiny pocket dog. It wasn't barking, just trembling and whimpering. The well was around 2 meters deep, maybe a bit more. Misha locked eyes with the boy. "Is this your doggy?" He nodded, crying even more intensely. Misha smiled. "Don't cry. You're a brave boy. We will rescue your lion." He took off his jacket and handed it to Margot. He checked his pants pockets to make sure he didn't lose anything, then lowered his feet into the well. Thankfully, there was a step at about 1 meter deep, making the rescue task easier. Misha got covered in dirt and mud. It was dark and sticky. He picked up the dog, which was trembling as if it were sitting in the middle of a glacier. He had to tuck the dog under his shirt to free his hands. Misha emerged from the well with everyone's eyes fixed on him. "What were you doing? It's like you've returned from the dead." The elderly women relaxed. He took out the dog and handed it to the boy. The boy clung to the dog and held it close. The dog joyfully licked the boy's face, making his tears flow once again. This boy reminded Misha of someone, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. But it didn't matter, as all his childhood acquaintances were now parents, and this boy must be the child of one of them. The boy clung to him, giving him a hug with his free hand. Unable to express his thanks through words, he expressed his gratitude in this manner. He walked away, and Misha watched him leave. Finally, he turned to Margot. "Will you let me in when I'm this dirty?" Margot laughed. "Come on, hero. Even though I'm an old lady, I have a modern washing machine." They made their way to the house. Misha was feeling quite content for the first time since he had arrived. At home, Misha started the laundry himself. Margot's washing machine was one of the latest models. Afterward, they sat down for dinner. No matter how hard Misha tried to push the image of the boy out of his mind, he couldn't. "Is this boy from around here, Margarita Genadievna?" Margot looked at him with a strange expression and replied, "Yes, he's from the house next door. His mother is always working, so she got him a dog for company. The other kids don't play with him, they just tease him. So he's become close friends with his dog." "Why is his mother always working? Doesn't she have a husband?" Margot shook her head and said, "No, she doesn't. And Slavka is a good, smart boy, but he has some issues." Was he always like this? Margot wasn't sure, but she had heard that something had happened to him in their previous town. Since then, he stopped speaking. His mother took him to various places seeking help, but while she's at work, he is alone for half the day, and the neighbor helps look after him. Misha didn't know who the mother or the neighbor were, but he felt a connection with the boy. He wanted to do something to help him. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't realize Margot was observing him intently. She then grinned and asked, "Why do you look so concerned, Mish?" "I'm thinking, I have a friend who owns a private children's clinic in the city. They have excellent specialists who often consult with experts from abroad. I would like to bring Slava there," Misha replied. "But it's quite expensive. My mother struggles to pay for everything," Margot told him, concerned. Misha didn't say anything further. He pondered over his thoughts. Later that evening, he decided to call his friend. "Hey, quick question. There's this boy, around 7 years old. He used to talk, but now he's suddenly become mute," Misha mentioned. "It's a common case, and it's not easy to treat. However, there is still a chance. Is it someone you know?" his friend asked. "Yeah, someone I know. If they are interested, could I bring them to your clinic?" Misha inquired. "Well, if you know them personally, I can offer a discount. Just let me know," his friend replied. "Thanks, man. I'll get back to you if we decide to go ahead," Misha said appreciatively. "All right, but please expect some delay." The longer the boy remains silent, the harder it will be to treat him. After ending the call, Misha pondered over the situation. The amount his friend mentioned wasn't massive, but it was significant for him, and undoubtedly it would be unaffordable for that woman. Why was he so concerned about them? Misha couldn't provide an answer, especially since he hadn't even met that woman once. The following day, Misha arrived and immediately spotted Slavka. It was their day off, yet Slavka was alone again, playing with his dog in the far corner of the yard away from other children. Margot was still sitting on the bench. Misha approached Slava. The boy noticed him and smiled. Misha felt a twinge of familiarity while looking at the boy. Why hadn't he asked Margot about his mother? Perhaps his perplexity and the feeling of misunderstanding would have dissipated. "Are you playing?" Misha inquired. Slava nodded, and Misha gently stroked the dog behind its ear. "What's your name, buddy?" Misha asked. Slava promptly grabbed a twig and traced a few letters in the sand. Krosh. His name was Krosh. "His name is Krosh," Misha repeated. The boy nodded once more. Misha observed Slava for a moment. "Is your mother at home?" Slava shook his head, indicating that she was not. Then he took Misha's hand and pointed to 8 o'clock on the clock. Since it was currently 7, his mother would return home in an hour. Slava bid farewell and entered the house. Marga glanced at him briefly and then proceeded home herself. She needed to prepare dinner for her tenant. During the meal, she inquired, "What were you doing with Slavka today?" "Well, Margarita Genadievna, I can't say for certain. I want to help the boy, and then I called my friend who is ready to take him to the clinic immediately. However, I'm unsure his mother will accept help from a stranger. I'm contemplating whether or not to approach her." "Misha, don't dwell on it. Just offer your help. It's a wonderful thing to do. People don't assist each other very often nowadays. Although I am concerned that she might decline your offer. I only hope that she prioritizes Slava's well-being and thinks rationally. But when a child is sick, pride should be the last thing on your mind." "You're correct. You're right. You don't know who the mother is or how she will react. Well, I'm going to go. My friend told me that they can cure these things. That means Slavka can have a normal life. Misha stood up and started packing. Margot whispered, God forbid you succeed. On his way out, Misha realized he didn't know where to go. He returned to Margot. Margarita Genadievna, which apartment do they live in? The 10th one. Misha took a step towards the exit, but then stopped. He froze. His head throbbed and his palms became sweaty. He turned around. 10th, yes, Misha. Slavka's mother, Tatiana. She came back with him 3 years ago. Misha left the apartment with unsteady legs. He stopped in the courtyard. Tanya, what should he do? He understood that he couldn't leave Slavka without help, but he also knew that Tanya wouldn't listen to him. After all, he had treated her unfairly. Misha approached the next entrance. No matter what happens, he had to try. He had to try, that's all. He rang the doorbell and the door opened almost immediately. Slavka and Krosh looked at him. Slava, who's there? Tatiana came out into the hallway. She hadn't changed much. She was still beautiful and gentle. The only difference was that she had gained a little weight, which suited her well. You? What are you doing here? Slava started gesturing excitedly, and Tanya said, So you're the one who saved Krosh? Tanya, I know you're not happy to see me, but please listen to me. I came for Slava. Tanya turned pale. Slava? What about Slava? Don't worry. It's nothing. You see, I have a friend in Moscow who runs a clinic for children. They specialize in cases like Slava's. He's willing to help Slava. Tanya settled herself on the couch, consumed by her deepest longing for her son to regain his ability to speak. She blamed herself entirely. It had been a few years ago, and they still resided in a different city. Tanya was driving with Slavka beside her when, caught up in distraction, she failed to notice a dog that unexpectedly darted out in front of their car. Witnessing it all unfold, Slava fell silent. The incident had left an indelible mark on the boy, devastating him. Initially, Tanya had brushed it off, believing it to be a temporary state of shock that would pass after a day or two. Yet almost 4 years had come and gone, and nothing had changed. The weight of guilt consumed Tanya, for she felt responsible for ruining her son's life. We don't have the money for that. I've heard about this clinic, Tanya confessed. Tanya's friend Misha responded, Tanya, I do. Can I help? Maybe not with everything, but at least contribute. 3 days later, Misha set off with Tanya and Slava, determined to provide assistance. It was decided that Krosh, their pet, would accompany them. He'll stay with me. Hopefully, he won't have enough time to devour all the furniture. Misha chuckled, provoking laughter from Slava and a smile from Tanya. The whirlwind nature of it all, the unexpected turn of events, left them in awe. Misha's assistance combined with the prospect of the clinic felt like a sudden snowfall. Misha parked the car near the clinic, and the three of them made their way to the entrance. Tanya felt an overwhelming sense of nervousness, while Slava, in contrast, curiously observed his surroundings. In the clinic's courtyard, a sprawling playground for children caught Slava's attention. Amongst the patients who were permitted to play freely, Slava's eyes fixated on this wonderful sight. Misha knocked on the door, and upon hearing a response, they entered. Warmly embracing their friend, Misha ushered everyone to have a seat. He began to review Slava's medical records, asking Tanya a series of questions to which she responded. Eventually, their friend turned his attention to Slava. Well, young man, shall we begin treatment and then have a chat? He proposed, prompting Slava to smile and nod in agreement. Tanya then asked if she could accompany her son during the treatment. Of course. Your son will have a private room, so please feel free to join him, their friend assured them, pressing a button on his desk to summon a nurse. Please escort him to room 5, he instructed. As Tanya and Slava left the room with the nurse, their friend turned to Misha, a teasing gleam in his eye. Ah, you are such a troublemaker. Why is that? The reason is because you have been keeping the fact that you have a son hidden. That's surprising. What son? What are you talking about? Are you serious? Glory is not your son? That's strange. You and him look exactly the same. And then Misha had a realization. He suddenly recognized who Slava reminded him of. Slava reminded him of himself. Misha looked at the boy and saw a reflection of his own childhood. He stood up, then sat back down. Misha, am I understanding correctly? Is he really your son and you just didn't know? Oh my God, I feel like such an idiot. It suddenly dawned on him that on that very day, Tanya had prepared a special dinner, probably wanting to share the news. And Tanya will never forgive him. Oleg, What should I do? Well, brother, it's up to you. How is it possible that you had no idea? I pushed her away once. I trusted people and pushed her away. Yeah, that's a tough situation. Well, you have about a month while they're here to try and fix it, or at least attempt to. Margot was sitting on a bench feeling bored when she noticed Michael's car. She stood up and hurried towards it. Slaka jumped out of the car. It felt like they had only been gone for 2 months, yet he had grown so much. Slaka approached Margot and greeted her. Hello. It was such an unexpected and different moment that tears started forming in Margot's eyes. Oh, Slovachka, they really helped you. Michael was walking towards her with Tatiana by his side. Margot looked at Tanya's face and instantly understood everything. They had reconciled. Tanya had a radiant smile on her face, even though she was trying to hide it. Misha embraced Margot as if she were his own. Margarita Genadievna, we have come to extend an invitation to you for the wedding. If you hadn't taken me in, our paths may have never crossed. Margaret's eyes welled up with tears. What kind of guest am I? She said, her voice trembling. You are the most important guest, Margarita Genadievna reassured the speaker. Margarita Genadievna, did you know from the beginning that Slavko was my son? It was strange that you didn't realize it. He bears a striking resemblance to you, Margot replied. You fool, all along I was wondering who he reminded me of. Margarita Genadievna, I will arrange for a car to pick you up in 2 weeks, and please, no refusals will be accepted. The wedding celebration was in full swing. Misha had decided to make it a grand affair. The hall was filled with so many people that they were becoming exhausted from receiving congratulations. Suddenly, during the peak of the festivities, Tanya turned pale and hastily left the hall. Margot and the others were standing nearby and witnessed the scene. Misha looked at Margot with a perplexed expression, while Margot remained silent with a knowing smile. What's the matter with her? Misha asked. Margot smiled and replied, well, at least when the second child is born, Daddy will be present. Misha looked at Margot in surprise. Then a foolish grin spread across his face as he hurriedly chased after his wife. From that moment on, he would never leave her side. He vowed to be there every second, every minute, and not miss a single moment, just like the first time around.